Thanks. I'm declaring the meeting opening, and there's an apology for lateness from Councillor Henderson. Nothing further? Okay.
Morning.
Mover and seconder to accept that.
I'm an apology for early departure, please. I've got a funeral to go to.
Thank you. Wangara boys. In favour? Aye. No, carried. Thank you. No electronic attendance requests. Any declarations of interest, especially? No. Should be. Everyone who's got a mortgage should have a declaration of interest today. Right, to confirm the minutes of the inaugural meeting, the extraordinary meeting on 10th and the 17th, if I have a mover and a seconder to confirm those fully, sayers in favour? Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you very much. We have 2 public inputs received, and so I would like to welcome to the bench Gail Baldock, who's submitted a, I don't know, did everyone get the stuff that was given? Several pages of it. And I'm told that the rules allow you to battle away for 5 minutes, so off you go. Your time starts now. Oh, well, hang on, we'll go back to the start.
Got it now. Time starts now.
Now, okay, I've got you now.
Okay.
Go.
Hi. Oh, it sounds very loud. I'd like to welcome all of the new councillors and those that came back in again, and yeah, thank you for letting me speak today. So we've just been through an election. There's been a low turnout as usual, and you might ask why. Why don't the public engage? What happens in local government affects people on a day-to-day basis far more than what happens in central government, so why don't people engage? It's basically the mud on the doorstep. So how do we get people to engage more? And the reason, I'm having trouble there with my words. People engage more if they actually know what's going on. So we need to be more transparent in that. This system, which doesn't seem to be working at the moment, of filming, but whatever, has meant that more people are actually hearing what goes on in council because they can go back and they can look at the videos that come from it or the live feed at the time. We were very entertained by one of your last meetings and chose it over Netflix. So the council is one of the largest organisations in Australasia. That really gives you a chance to get really good value for money, but you're not doing that. You have preferred contractors instead of having an open way of selecting who gets to do the work for you. And the late great Penny Bright would say that it has been discovered worldwide that you can have 1/3 of your savings of the money that you spend if you are open and transparent and go through a tendering process. You know, Wayne, you're a civil engineer. My background is architecture, 30 years working for all the big boys around town, and used to a tendering process. You don't necessarily need to choose the lowest tender, but you do need to give people an opportunity to put forward what their experience is. And, you know, if you look at all the humps and bumps that are all over town, you can see that some are built well and some are built really badly. So you're also not following through on what these preferred contractors do. So I'm trying not to read because I'm dyslexic, so I always get it wrong when I read out loud, so I use my notes, and I hope you've all read them. So we need to get the public to take interest in what's going on. During COVID, the local board meetings had to be videoed to allow for engagement from elsewhere. And those videos take a long time to actually get up on the Facebook page of that particular board, and there's no link to those included in the minutes, and there's that ability to go back to the minutes and add those links in, and that would be a really big help in the first place, that if you went to the minutes and you could easily, the top, the bottom, whatever, in a great location, find the link to the video so you could see what went on. Tuesday's meeting at the Waitemata Local Board was particularly entertaining when the ministry threatened to use taxpayer money to put litigation against ratepayers if the board didn't extend their landowner use of the park for Erebus. So there's exciting stuff that goes on that, as I said, better than Netflix. So we need to be far more transparent in what we do, and that means that all local boards should open their workshops as 4 local boards have done so far. I'm really surprised that the Waitemata Local Board hasn't included themselves in that. You know, as the Civic Centre of Auckland, they should be the leaders, not the followers. So the process that happens at the moment is fake and flawed engagement rather than authentic engagement, and Auckland Transport's one of the worst of this. I know somebody who works in council, not naming names, but they work as a journalist for the Have You Say team. And this is how the process works. It's not genuine. What it appears is that there's a predetermined decision that's put out for consultation, and then that consultation is lined up for the decision that's already previously made, and it's multi-guess. And if you don't know about it, then you, well, gosh, that went really fast. If you don't know about the process, then you're going to end up with a decision that was predetermined. There's engagement via social pinpoint with Auckland Transport, which I've been involved in, and then the information never came up. The key stakeholders have been excluded. I'm trying to get through what I need to now in the last minute, and there's a heck of a lot. You guys need to embrace social media. The local boards don't always have a place to engage there, and also each of the councillors, you know, social media is the new way forward, and some councillors have used social media and engage with their community, and others block community, particularly advocates, and that's not a good look, and it doesn't let you know what's actually going on. And the councillor from our region lost their job from not engaging. Can I just have one more second, which is to talk about legal battles that the community have with council, where the ratepayers' money is used for council to have their experts engaged, but the community don't have theirs, and you could actually avoid litigation by being more transparent, and you could also have a way that the community get to have some sort of funding if their case is authentic, rather than having to have unpaid witnesses and unpaid counsel. So I hope you all read your homework and you know more of what I talked about there. Thank you.
Stay there because I've got questions, and Councillor Sayers has a question.
Yes.
Councillor Watson to fire.
Yes, thank you through the Mayor, and thank you, Gail, for coming along. That 5 minutes goes very quickly, isn't it? When you're in the seat, you're trying to cover a lot with us, but I do appreciate the intent and the messaging that you're getting across there in terms of why such low engagement in the election turnouts. And you're touching on some points, and that's what my questions around this, Mr. Mayor, about, you know, you're trying to feed back to us why you believe that is. And and one of them that I'd like to pick up on around my question is the preferred contractor scenario that you brought up, and the need for more tendering. My question, I just couldn't quite understand in terms of what model you're proposing there. Just wondering if you could explain, because we've got the preferred contractors, they're there because it's seen as better value for money regionally. If we have one firm doing it, they often subcontract, right? And then they could even subcontract again. So, and I understand that those contracts are actually available on the internet. You could actually look up those subcontractors. So are you saying that every contract should be tendered, or those subcontracts should then go out for tender? Is there a dollar value? I'm just trying to understand, Gail, how that might work more practically as your suggestion going forward compared to the current model. I haven't quite understood that.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Ventia, an Australian company, get to look after our parks. And when it comes to Western Springs Lakeside Park, there's a Japanese garden. And that Japanese garden has 15 subcontractors so Ventia get to clip the ticket and then they get to put it out to all of these people. And the water's still all dirty and green and it's not working at all. And so community have taken it over. So Ventia are getting paid for that and all their subcontractors, and then community are doing it for nothing. So, you know, in each of your areas, there's an opportunity to look at what those contracts are and what's going on. There was another example, trying to remember whose area it was in, somewhere up north where they planted plants and then for a native forest, and then they realised that they wanted to get a view from the kiosk down, and some exorbitant fee of mowing them all over, all of these plants, and then finding out afterwards that they'd actually planted lower ones to let the view happen anyway. So a whole pile of money was spent and then it was destroyed. And as far as having preferred contractors for, you know, little things and projects, and knowing that if a tree's felled, that you've got somebody that you can call in immediately, that can work. But when you've got larger projects, putting those out to tender is the way to actually ensure that you've got people competing with each other for this work that is huge, because you're such a huge organisation.
Thank you, Gail. Just, if I may, Wayne, just a supplementary, because it goes to the committees that you've set up, and you've got a committee there that I'm the chair of. And my understanding, probably within the scope of that committee, is perhaps look at the type of issues that's been raised today through Gail that comes within scope of that committee to kind of look at.
Fair enough. Okay. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Gail, for your presentation on transparency, and certainly in respect of participation in election. What we find in our area anyway is the areas that have a higher coverage of council matters, like in Councillor Sayers' ward through their local magazine, and also in the Hibiscus Coast, inevitably have a higher voter turnout. So the people that know more about council business is reflected in the turnout in the local elections. My quick question to you about transparency, though, is, so that's coverage of council matters is one thing. In terms of transparency into council matters, what would you like to see happen in this term of council then, in respect of a kind of a principle or an approach or response to this poor voting turnout, and to the concerns of, you know, various communities, not least of which your own, where you feel that transparency is not only lacking, but it's actually affecting people's view of council and participation in council?
I think that the areas where the councillors use social media, I mean, you, John and Desley are two really good examples of engaging with your community on social media. And really bad examples, as I said, are those that have blocked people, particularly community advocates. I mean, I know of a community advocate who was blocked for asking that councillor if she lived in the ward. Well, that should be a question that you can answer. You know, when it comes to social media, you do get trolls and you do get some negativity. But when you've got the pages that go along with each of the boards, and that they don't actually allow comments on them, and that when you make comments and you actually ask a really important question to the admin, and the admin don't respond, and the local board members don't engage in that either. So, you know, we've got a whole variety of social media, and there needs to be training, I believe, of all the councillors in how you can engage. And you can either have your private page where you put the information up if you feel strong enough to do that, or you can have a page that's separate. I mean, I know you have both pages, and some councillors have one or the other, but you really should be available wherever you're discussing your political views to whatever the community has to say. And you just need to get a thicker skin. I mean, I deal with this on a daily basis, and there are trolls that come and say pretty nasty stuff to me, but very rarely do I block anyone, but I certainly wouldn't block important people in the community. So that could help a lot.
Thank you. Councillor Furley, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I represent the area of Manukau, and you're probably aware we have the lowest voter turnout. We did last time and the time before. However, there's a lot of research that shows that there is a strong correlation between areas of high deprivation, issues to do with inequities and things like that, and low participation in democracy, in voting, for example. I just wonder if you're aware of that and if you've got any thoughts or any solutions based around that. Kia ora.
Hi, nice to meet you. So, yes, obviously the lower socio-economic groups, the people are pretty busy with their lives, and they don't even necessarily get how much what happens at council affects their lives. And, that's the responsibility, in my opinion, of the councillors and the local board members in that committee to engage further with their community. I mean, I know Councillor Sayers has a meeting time for people to come in with their individual issues. One of the things that you have got in South Auckland is you've got large communities that go to their local churches, and so there's a chance of engaging there. Although the other disadvantage with that I've heard, and again, this is just what I've heard, is that sometimes voting papers are taken over by members of churches or larger organisations and vote on the behalf of the people, but don't really get them to understand what it is that they're voting for, and they feel an alliance to someone because of their ethnicity rather than finding out what that person is really about and how they're going to represent them. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it makes your position very clear. Thank you. Kia ora.
Yeah, I just want to say I actually run some social media pages, and one of them is on state housing, so I'm very aware of the lower socioeconomic groups, and many of the people that are on the street know who I am and know what I stand for, which is a welfare state where everybody fares well. So that's really important.
Thank you for that. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Gail. And look, I think my question is more for our organisation and for us as a governing body, but I'd be interested in what your thoughts are on it, and I acknowledge how much time you obviously put into your homework for us. But having been, and I noticed how long or how hard the struggle was for you to get your message across in 5 minutes, and having been a local board chair and had to sit there and tried to get our local board comments over in 5 minutes, I wonder whether there's an opportunity and a willingness of this organisation to look at how long we give the public to come and speak, and maybe it's more of an issue for us as to the efficiency of how we go about our business here, instead of and actually allowing and playing into what you're talking about, and having the public take an interest is giving them a more meaningful opportunity to come than 5 minutes, and I include local boards in that. That would require a change of our standing orders. And, and I'm certainly one who would prefer to see that we gave our public more opportunity to come engage meaningfully, and we actually look at how we undertake our business here if we need to cut back on time. But your thoughts on that, Gail, having just struggled now to get, a large piece of work across in 5 minutes?
I've been engaging with the Waitemata local board for the last 4 or 5 years. I've done a number of deputations and public forums, and we got the standing orders changed there for public input in public forum from 3 minutes to 5 minutes, which certainly helps. When you've got a big chunk of work like this, the obvious method forward would be to invite me into a workshop to talk in some more detail about it, rather than necessarily trying to resolve it all today. And hopefully that workshop would also be open to the public to hear what's going on, and I could give you some examples of what it's like for me to take Auckland Council community facilities to the Environment Court last year over Western Springs and the results from that. I really do hope that you took the time to read what I sent in, including the articles in the Ponsonby News, and like John was saying before, you know, it's about the engagement that happens within the community, and we're lucky enough to have the Ponsonby News in central Auckland, and a lot of these issues do get to be written about there. I write a couple of those each time, so please invite me to talk some more about this in a workshop and have it open to the public. Thank you, Andy, for your question.
Okay, thanks very much, Gail. I'll just slightly sum up. You've covered an awful lot of stuff in the written stuff, and I'd like to hope that everybody's read it. In fact, having read it, I found my name in there, but that was from well before I was a candidate. It was just
It was
as a
when you were a,
person,
yes, it was when
as
you were
a
a
person
candidate.
offering some costing to you. I'd like to hope that Councillor Lee might pick and Councillor Baker might look into the Meola Road one as an example of sometimes members of the community come up with quite good ideas, and we shouldn't just judge them because they are members of the community. So I'd like to thank you for that.
Thank you. Can I answer that, even though it wasn't an actual question?
Yeah.
I've also, so whilst you're talking about my design for the parking for the dog walking park, if the cycleway goes ahead to remove all the parking from Meola Road, I have actually done a plan of how the cycleway could actually go and not have to be along the busy Meola Road.
I'm just going to ask Councillor Lee to follow that through in his position as an AT board member. Okay, and
Hear a lot from Gail, Mr Mayor.
thank you.
I talk
I'm
to
sure
her
you do,
often.
and I'll let you carry on, and I'll thank you for your little diagram of the 4 squares of Auckland that explains why I can't get from one side of the city to the other either without a ticket. Thank you very much, and
Thank you.
I'm happy to move a vote of thanks.
do we accept that? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Watts. All those in favour, please say aye.
Thank you, everyone.
No. Thank you. I'd like to invite a member of the public, Lisa Prager, to the desk to address us on something, details of request. Good morning.
Thank you, Worship. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't think I've been able to say that for nearly, 9 years. It's a pleasure because I feel suddenly there are adults in the room and that there is a sense of public responsibility to the ratepayers and that there is a leadership that will help take us forward. I can say that at the governing body level, but I cannot say that at the Waitemata local board level. I don't know if any of you know this, but during the election, CNR received 4 votes and City Vision received 3. That was a mandate for change. We have suffered in the Waitemata local board area with a board that would not listen to the public, who chose to fell over 180 mature trees in the Western Springs forest, not using the VISA report or under the resource consent they were given, but just to clear fell the entire native bush arising underneath. It cost ratepayers over $2 million. We hoped that when there was an election and we elected 4 CNR people, that we would have the change we required, that we would be listened to. But you know what's happened? Completely the opposite. One member of CNR, Genevieve Sage, behind closed doors, has manipulated and managed to, I suppose, manipulate our democracy, placing herself in the very centre of that board. At the same time, she has been elected as chair, giving her 2 votes. That is, when the decisions are split between 3 CNR and 3 City Vision, Jen has the casting vote, both as herself or as the chair. Now, this means that we do not have democracy in the Waitemata local board area. We have a totally different situation. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look at billboards and there's an individual who's branded themselves under one area or category which curtails to provide certain services or support the community a certain way, and then immediately there's an election, changes. I find that treacherous. I find that against the democratic principles. And I'm here today to ask which committee here at the governing body level is responsible for overseeing our local boards. Not only has she become the chair, but you'll notice that she has given all of the leads to City Vision, putting the CNR people in a minority. Now that would be really like, I don't know what you'd call that, manipulation, abuse of power. And I wonder how this governing body can allow a renegade board to run out of control without so much as lifting a finger. Now you might think that this doesn't really matter, that it's just a little local board, but the truth is they have enormous power over our daily lives, as seen in the Greylin cycleway, which destroyed not only shopkeepers, but caused a fracture in our community that I have never seen before. Now, I'm very, very distressed about this, because when I use my name or my reputation to encourage other people in my community to elect someone, I expect them to support what you call the code of conduct, of which I'm sure you're all incredibly familiar with. The key being two things: trust and respect. Now, Jen Sage has destroyed the trust in our community. She stood for one thing and now represents another. Destroying trust has meant that she has no respect from the community. Now, most of them don't even know what's happened yet. And of course, Gail and I are doing our best to communicate, as you know how hard it is to communicate with the community en masse and quickly. But when they find out this treacherous behaviour, this destruction of our democracy, this perversion of open, transparent and accountable governance, holy Kumara, you're not going to want to be anywhere near us, because the media will pick it up. Well, maybe Mr. Wilson won't, but hey, that's another story. The bottom line here is that you have a problem already brewing right here in the CBD, right here in Greylin, Westmere, Herne Bay, the CBD, Parnell. And it was exhibited at the meeting on Tuesday, when the issue about Erebus should have been an open and shut case. And yet there we were. We had the ministry sitting there going, if you don't do as we say, we'll sue you. And instead of it being a clean, open cases, we as the landowners have heard the public, the 25,000 people who said not a good idea, it should have been ended. But it wasn't. And it wasn't because Jen Sage is playing both sides at the same time, and somebody in this room needs to stop it right now. What would we like? We'd like a by-election. We'd like it have to be totally relitigated, but I don't know. I don't have an army of lawyers behind me that can tell me what we can do, but sure as heck, you cannot allow this situation to occur, because it was a backroom deal done by Jen and Mr. Northey to actually put City Vision back in the driver's seat. And here's the proof. There it is, all up there. You can see who's in the lead. So thank you for your time. I'm sorry to have to come here. You know, I really hoped that I could hang up my hat, throw my spurs in the corner, put my feet up, and not have to come here as a kvetching old gal. But the truth is, there is a problem. Please fix it, and fix it quick. Thank you.
Thank you for that eloquent and spirited defence of democracy. I don't know if anyone's got any questions about that. It was quite clear, but Councillor Fletcher has, and I have one too. I don't know what we can do about it, actually.
Could you ask the biggest legal eagles who aren't Simpson Grierson, who actually happens to be Jen's husband's company, to find out if there's anything in the law?
I don't know the answer to that, but Councillor Fletcher, you might throw some clarity to this, or oil on the fire. I'm not sure.
I can bring no wisdom to this specific issue, but I thank you for bringing it to our attention. What my question is usually after an election, there is some review that Phil Wilson's committee, the Democracy Services, into the election. Are there other matters that you think need attention? I personally don't like postal voting. Other people, we've all got things that we have a measure of dissatisfaction with. And I wonder whether there are other things that we should be looking at comprehensively.
Yes, it's really simple. Authentic and honest behaviour by elected members, which is not what Jen is exhibiting. You cannot be elected by one thing and do another. The best thing that this particular governing body has done has come out on behalf of the public, who've said, we can't handle Auckland Transport anymore. We can't handle the port issue anymore. And you are taking obvious steps that the public can see to deal with it. This is what will bring the public here, or at least get them to the elections, because it's not what's been happening for 12 years, which is a whole sleight of hand, a wasting of ratepayers' money, spending thousands on vanity projects. Stopping that will bring the public open and honest consultation, not fake and flawed like Auckland Transport is engaged in. Get rid of the fake, get rid of the flawed. Be open, be transparent, show good governance, and they will come.
I take it, Your Worship, that Mr Stabick will inform us at some point, as normally happens after an election, that there will be a review and there will be information that will come to us.
Well, could we also ask for some legal minds that aren't biased within this organisation to maintain this organisation, come to look at what has happened? Why not even look at the emails of how this came to pass between Northey and Jen? I mean, it's not a big tricky case, this, but the power that now resides in the Waitemata board, and you know this, Desley, better than anyone, needs to be dealt with, because otherwise it's going to blow out of proportion. And forget your good work, all the media is going to cover is the argy-bargy between Lisa and Jen and Gail and Jen and everything else. So if you don't want to dominate, deal with it internally. Thank you for your time.
Hang on, you haven't got off. I still have a question yet from Councillor Dalton. And there may be more.
Hey, thank you. I support what you're saying about people standing honestly and for what they believe in is right for their community. You're specifically talking about one particular board and one or two particular people, but I wonder how broad this is within the environment in which we are. How many other people stood under one ticket, endorsed by a ticket, and actually weren't? And then they got elected, and they're actually somebody else. So, I mean, it goes to the principle of what you're talking about. And I don't know that there's anything, and we will find out, but I think that's politics. It's not right, and there's a lot about politics that isn't right. My question for you was, are you aware of other people, councillors or local board members, that might have stood and been endorsed under a ticket and then actually to get elected, but then fell back to their core beliefs?
It's an interesting question, and I wish that late great Penny Bright was here, because she could tell you chapter and verse how and when this came to pass. I know that it happened in Watercare many years ago, when Watercare said one thing and did another. I think you can stop this. I think you can pass a motion that says any elected member who lies or misleads the public at the time of election can and will be dismissed. It's there in the Local Government Act. I found it, but it's, a couple of lines at the bottom stuck underneath. It is there, and it says basically you have to behave in a genuine manner, and you have to, well, actually, I'll send it to you because it's there. But because I'm not a legal lawyer, I can't strip it out, hold it up and go, there you go. But I know that when it comes to vested interests, like over the submerged arena downtown, that her husband is particularly interested in pushing, and there will be a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Lisa. You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's kind of a case of what they might call waka jumping in Parliament. There is legislation in Parliament about that, but I'm not aware of any in local government. So whilst you've raised a concern, and I was one of the people who voted for one side and got something different in that area, it's concerning. I'm not quite sure if we can anything that we can do about it. We will ask Phil Wilson to comment on that at some stage over the next week as our governance advisor. Thank you very much. I'd like to put a motion that we receive your report, and thank you for presenting it, and it'll be seconded by Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Thank you very much for your efforts. There is no local board input section today, and there are no known extraordinary items. Though I would like to move to the Chief Executive and the Group Financial Officer report an update on where we've got to on that plus CCO partnerships, particularly in light of the current concerns about, for those who haven't read the paper today, but the cost of debt has risen dramatically overnight, and we have been generous with accumulating debt, so I don't imagine we're going to get particularly happy news. It's over to you, Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could, thank you, councillors. This is the first of what will be monthly Chief Executive and Chief Financial Officer updates to the governing body. Financial performance reports for October 2022 are attached to this report for the Auckland Council Group, as well as individual entity reports for Auckland Council Parent, each of the CCOs and the Port. The governing body will also receive full quarterly financial and service performance reports, the first of which will be the Quarter 1 report on the 15th of December at the governing body meeting then. Peter Gudsall, Group CFO, will provide more detail on financials shortly, and of course each month from a CE report perspective I'll generally cover a number of topical areas. This month I'll cover the government reform program, people and workforce, and financial and service performance. Given the OCR announcements yesterday that the Mayor referred to, we will focus more on the financial update today. Firstly, let me make some comments in relation to the government reform program, which continues to be an area of focus for us. I want to update on 3 current areas of reform where bills or reports have been or are about to be released. Firstly, the resource management reform. The government's introduced 2 bills as part of the resource management reform to replace the existing Resource Management Act. First of those is the Spatial Planning Bill, proposes 14 new regional plan areas across Auckland, across the country, to set out future direction in that region. Auckland will be one of those regions, its own region of the 14. And then the second part of that is the Natural and Built Environment Bill, which focuses on outcomes rather than effects and puts in place all of the general provisions and processes for resource management. The Environment and Select Committee will consider the bills and call for submissions and hearings, and we will prepare, through the Chief Planning Officer in my team, a response to government submission from across the group as guided by elected members. We'll report back when the submission period is known and work with local boards and the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee on Council's submission. In relation to the Future for Local Government review, the work on the Future for Local Government has been underway for the last 18 months, and the report, draft report into the Future for Local Government was released in October. With the release of the draft report, the panel are underway in a series of local government, mana whenua and stakeholder engagements across the country. Auckland's governing body and local board sessions are scheduled for the 5th and 6th of December. Submissions on the draft report close on the 28th of February and will inform the panel's final report due to be reported to government in June 2023. Once again, our team will support the Council's submission as guided by governing body and local board feedback. And the third piece of government reform is the Water Services Entity Bill. The Finance and Expenditure Select Committee recently reported back to Parliament on the Water Services Entity Bill. One of the many of Council's key submission points that were made to the committee in July 2022 were not reflected in the Select Committee's recommendations. It is expected that the bill will pass into law and gain royal assent in December of this year. There is further legislation that will follow the bill with more detailed implementation arrangements, powers and functions and economic regulation and consumer protection regimes. Memoranda on these three areas of government reform were circulated to elected members recently. Our team will continue to provide support to elected members as required and are available to take questions if necessary. Secondly, I want to turn to people and workforce. Workforce costs, given the current financial outlook, we've put in place additional management tools around recruitment. They were implemented in October. The principle we're adopting here, of course, is that frontline roles we are replacing, frontline and customer-facing roles we're replacing, while any other roles, support roles or management roles, are coming under much more significant scrutiny and review. We're tracking 2% below year-to-date budget for employee benefits overall, but we will see, of course, seasonal fluctuations of FTE as we bring on temporary summer park rangers for more remote and busy regional parks and lifeguards for outdoor pools, which are opening shortly or have already opened. Our current turnover rate's 15.9% across the organisation, on average, higher in some areas, lower in others. A marginal increase over September's turnover, which was 15.8. We measure employee engagement 4 times a year. The overall engagement score is 7.6, down 0.1 since the last survey. Finally, let me turn to financial and service performance. From a financial point of view, capital expenditure for the quarter, July to September, was 79 million against a budget of 102. Direct revenue 197 million against a budget of 194, so a $3 million favourable variance. Direct operating expenditure of 414 million, 16 million below budget of 431, again a favourable variance. Savings towards the Council's $90 million savings target for this year is currently 57 million. We still have 33 million of savings in this year to identify and deliver. We will focus more on service performance in the Q1 performance report. A range of other performance areas of note, building and resource consents, often of interest. There were 1,573 building consents lodged in October, which is a 3% reduction on September, so flattening of building consents. Similarly, with resource consents, there were 1,399 resource consents lodged in October, 1% less than September. Flattening, but not yet dropping off. Also of note, I think, a 9% increase in food licences lodged, 148 of them, 23% increase in noise control requests. There were 4,507 requests received in October, a significant increase over September, about 1,000 more. I'll leave it at that, I think, and hand over to Peter for a more detailed update on financials.
Thank you, Jim. Jim's covered off in paragraph 4 some of the results for Auckland Council. I'll just briefly go through paragraph 3, some of the results for the group. I would like to, as a general overall comment, just talk about the results in general. There's some ups and downs, but there's not too much at this stage that is of context that would change the outlook for the year, and it doesn't change the context that we face for the next budget year. That context will be discussed more when I talk to the monetary policy statement implications for us later on. So with regard to paragraph 3, capital investment was an underspend of 153, driven by labour and material shortages, but there's an expectation that that will be addressed or mitigated throughout the remainder of the year. Direct revenue was higher by 2%. Direct operating expenditure was higher by less than 1%. Those two items work a lot in tandem with grants from Waka Kotahi for the half price fares coming through and the costs coming through in those items, and similarly the costs from MB and the revenue from MB for the support on Tamaki Regenerate. But there's an underlying weakness on fee and user charges, which is hidden within those results. Net debt, 371 million increase to 11.5 billion, with the year-end budget being 12 billion at this point. So those are some of the highlights on the performance reporting. If I head to paragraph 5, paragraph 5 talks to the performance reports that are attached to this. They are a monthly report as at the end of October, whereas the quarterly reports are September, and those performance reports are going to be provided to the governing body every month, in between those more fulsome quarterly performance reports. Also worth noting that the AT performance will be going to the Transport Committee on 1 December, and the CCOs will be reporting to a committee on the 5th as well. So there's an opportunity for more analysis of performance at those committees, as opposed to the overall group position at this one. If I turn to paragraph 6, for returning councillors, this will be old news, but each quarter the governing body will be provided with an update on the financial and non-financial performance. We will look to evolve the way in which we've been doing that, given that there will be a monthly financial performance coming to governing body, so there may be more of a focus on the non-financial performance at those quarterly sessions. We'll include progress updates on our strategic focus areas, key programs of work, people and performance risks and mitigations. Also included long-term plan performance measures, operating performance, capital performance and treasury updates. And that will be coming to the 15th December meeting of this body. They would generally be on a faster cadence than that. However, election inauguration has precluded that being able to be coming along any earlier. All right, paragraph 7, the economic and market update. It has been foreshadowed that this might not be great news, and that would be correct. The key economic market update covers the annual inflation rate. Until last night, the Consumer Price Index at 7.2%, well, actually that still stays at 7.2%, and we won't get another update until 25 January, and we should watch that result carefully. But MPS, the monetary policy statement from the RBNZ yesterday afternoon, gave us a view on that, what I'll talk to in bullet point 5. Unemployment rate 3.3%. This indicates whether tightening is working, and at this stage suggests, as RBNZ did last night, that we're at over full employment. GDP as at the end of June 1.7%. Dwelling consented numbers 21,985. That's 11% higher than the year ended September 21. So there is some aspects in that are a wee bit counterintuitive. Debt issuance for October 22. We got a Swiss francs green bond away in October. Given this was open for people to invest in at the same time that the UK pound was melting down, we were very pleased to have got that away. We were pleased to get the capacity and the interest in the market. Okay. Under item 6, the OCR and monetary policy statement, I can confirm that our interest in this was warranted, and I'll give you a bit of an update on that now. So since yesterday afternoon, we have been assessing the impact of that monetary policy statement. It was not a surprise that the RBNZ increased the OCR by 75 basis points. That was what a majority of banks and investors and forecasters had predicted. However, the messaging around a required increase through to an OCR rate of 5.5% in the third quarter of 2023 was higher than markets had expected. This has resulted in initial increases in the underlying cost of capital in the order of 26 to 15 basis points across a range of 2 to 10 years. It has risen more in the short term, so the impact is more in the short term than the long term. And that obviously has an impact on our cost of debts, one of the sensitivities we called out when we were doing our financial projections. Now, an implication of this is that releasing capital is of greater benefit as it avoids those high interest costs in the short term. In addition, the inflation forecast from RBNZ was also notably higher than what was included in their August monetary policy statement and consequently our October projections. Inflation for December this year, which drives our underlying workforce cost increases, are now projected to be 1% higher than in our October projections at around 7.5%. Now, it is difficult to be precise given the time frame we've had to assess this and the continuing uncertainty in this space. However, our best estimate at this stage is that across impacts on our cost of borrowing, workforce costs, and also the requirement to support our large index contracts, we will face around an additional 25 million of costs. So this therefore increases our operating challenge in FY24 from an estimate of 270 million to around 295 million. Now, obviously, this is not welcome news. However, we are well progressed around discussions on the FY24 budget, and the same levers remain available to Council for addressing this challenge, namely service and OPEX reductions, CAPEX phasing, revenue increases, asset sales, and the prudent use of debt. In my opinion, this news reinforces the importance of ensuring we achieve a credible and sustainable budget for the next financial year and beyond. And I can confirm and commit that staff will continue to provide advice to inform the decision that the Mayor and elected members have to make. So that's the update. With those decisions that face you in mind, paragraph 8 covers the process from here to achieve an annual budget. It has the public release of a mayoral proposal setting out items for consultation. Local boards will have the opportunity to provide input, and then governing body meets on 15 December, which is 3 weeks and a bit, to agree items to take forward to public consultation. If decisions relate to the consideration of options that require an LTP amendment, an external audit will be required and will need to be supported by a detailed statement of proposal. That sounds quite boring and legalistic, but it does impact severely upon our time frame, which is why I'm bringing it to your attention. Final budget decisions are obviously made following public consultation and prior to adoption of the final budget by 30 June. So that's a quick update on MPS from 2 o'clock yesterday. I'll now pass you across to Phil Wilson to give you an update on CCOs.
I'm just going to pause, Your Worship, in case you wanted to discuss any of those aspects before. Some of what I'm going to talk to is slightly administrative in terms of the CCO reporting.
Thank you for that. In that case, I'll take Councillor Sayers' question now, and Councillor Darby's as well, and then we'll refer to you, if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Peter, for the report and the update. I don't really want to make any comment, but the question really is around, and I was going to wait till after the CCOs, Phil, but it's around the City Rail Link Limited. We don't report on that as part of this agenda, and I'm just looking at the recommendations because I find it quite difficult to weigh up looking at our financial situation, through this report, and then also knowing that there's a big debt question coming up around CRL and operational costs on top of that. And I just wondered if there's the wisdom around presenting both of those at the same time rather than having them staggered. So I guess the question is around our ability, Mr. Mayor, if it's helpful to my colleagues, to have that update from CRL Limited included as part of this regular report, as part of this agenda item, or does it remain separated for those reasons, particularly with
Quite a good question, but in fact, I don't think the CRL is in a position to actually give us that. So what your question really is when will there be good news?
Well, any update on the figures around debt, but more importantly, Mr Mayor, the operational costs, we have no idea. We've always been told that we'll have an idea about how much the Tira link will cost, and I'm thinking about budgets going forward now. When that opens, it's a bit late. We should have a ballpark if we have the budget for opening in 2025 of that system.
If I talk to CRL on its inclusion within the finances currently and within next year's budget, the implications for both those terms are really around the equity injection that we make from our capital base towards the project. As we get more information around the outturn position for CRL, then we will be able to include that. And also as we get more information around the ownership structure of a number of those assets, we'll be able to update on the operational implications in the out years. However, it's not a performance issue other than regarding the capital that we invest into that entity over the next year and a half, which is the focus of this performance report and the annual budget.
Councillor Darby.
Oh, the quick ones, thanks, Mayor. Going back to the Chief Executive's commentary earlier, just in terms of staff numbers, is there a hiring freeze blanket at the moment? And if so, when was that put in place? Or is it in some parts of the organisation? Is it blanket or is it specific? And do we have an account of what the current vacancy rate is within the council?
Thanks, Councillor. There isn't an absolute freeze. There is a hiring restriction that's been put in place, that was put in place in October. The reason for that is because, with 15% churn across a workforce of 7,000 people, there's a, very big sort of machine that has to operate to ensure that frontline roles are appropriately staffed. And so frontline customer-facing roles, where there is a vacancy that requires replacement, we are replacing frontline customer-facing roles. The restrictions are in place on any roles that are not customer-facing frontline roles, and they are receiving much higher levels of scrutiny. As a consequence, we're currently a few hundred under our FTE profile, but part of that will be a function of the churn that we're constantly kind of responding to.
Okay, probably look into that one later on rather than now. And the second one to you, Peter, you've outlined yesterday's decision from the Reserve Bank with the OCR going up 75 points. I read that there is a strong signal that there's an additional 50 basis points in the new year, which would be before our absolute budget confirmation. Now, I'm not sure where that's coming from. Is it just economists speculating, or is it being signalled by the Reserve Bank? And if so, do we need to be weary of another 20 million on top of the 295?
Thank you for the question, and I'll try and clarify. The most important aspect of the Reserve Bank announcement yesterday for us was the indication that the rate that they thought they needed to go to was 5.5%. By the third quarter of FY23, calendar year, next year, 2023. And that was what drove up the interest rates. There was an expectation of 75 basis points this time. There's another expectation from most market analysts of 75 basis points increase early in the new year as well. Those items by themselves will not change our forward average cost of funds. What will is if in that space they do not perceive that their tightening is having the impact that they are looking for, which is effectively a slight recession. If they are not getting the impact that they desire from the OCR tightening, they have signalled that they will continue to tighten. And it is those types of longer run implications which would impact on our cost of debt. However, it's more the terminal rate and how far they have to keep tight for that will impact upon our cost of debt and the market position. I don't have a crystal ball. I was asked last time whether I thought 270 was it. I still don't have a crystal ball. We're all in this situation of having to wait and see whether the interventions work and how quickly they work.
One last quick one, and that is, if the Three Waters legislation progresses and it becomes law, and the the water care debt is transferred and healthy, I don't know, I guess part of the healthy waters debt is transferred. I asked this in a workshop, and I don't think it's sensitive. We couldn't put a figure on what sort of debt headroom that we might obtain out of that. And I'm just wondering, it just did surprise me that we couldn't actually identify what is likely to be transferred. I thought Watercare would know exactly, how much debt on their books, on our common books, could be transferred. Can we get an update? Can somebody do some work to find out what the level of debt is that would be transferred, that would give us some headroom?
We do have a very good handle, through you, Chair, on the level of debt within Watercare. The more problematic aspect is the definition of the assets that fall within the other water and which ones of those would transfer across to that water services entity. Associated with that is the decisions on assets, liabilities, revenues and costs and what would transfer. And it's only when all of those are worked through that you have an indication of what that does to your debt to revenue ratio. So we have a large portion of it, but there's very important aspects alongside it that we don't have clarity on enough to be able to make a determination. And that's both the case for us internally and credit rating agencies externally.
Look, apology then, because it might have sounded like I was criticising you, but the complexity is in the healthy waters side and understanding, what the values are in that area. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah, and they can also what the values of the asset redistribution is and what that does on our debt to asset ratio. So there's a lot of questions there, and you'll do well to keep asking until we do get some answers. Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. And just acknowledging, I've sent a whole lot of small questions through to Peter and the team, which I don't expect answers to until next week. So, but I do have two questions I wanted to ask now. The first one is in relation to the unemployment rate. Is it more useful for us to consider the Auckland unemployment rate as opposed to the national one? Are there cases where, the Auckland stats are significantly different from the national in a way that we should be considering differently? And then I've got one more question after that, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, you're bridging me into areas of fiscal policy, which I'm not really able to answer in a great sense. My feel on unemployment rate as an average is it undercalls a dispersion across various demographic and social groups. The main impact of that is not regional because it is the driver that the Reserve Bank is looking for in terms of its impact on whether they need to keep tightening. They have previously estimated the the non-accelerating employment rate is 5%. So if you have an unemployment rate of 5%, it's not impacting on inflation. So until they see the unemployment rate increasing from 3.3% towards that 5%, they're still concerned about whether they've tightened enough. That would be about as far as I'd like to bridge into fiscal policy on behalf of the RBNZ.
Thank you. Then my other question, so a lot of what's, and this may be a little bit more in the CCO or operational space, but let's see. A lot of the financial disruptions that are recorded in the report, reading the commentaries, there's a lot of mention around the delay to materials, labour shortages. Is this a new normal though? because that's one of the things I worry about, is that we think, oh, well, actually this is just a short-term thing, and sooner or later those labour and material shortages will sort of sort themselves out. But they've been going on a few years now, and it seems to me that some of this is actually baked into the system. It's not just COVID impacts, particularly as we see the impact of climate change, and you know, we're very reliant on goods coming by sea. So yeah, what was sort of the thinking there, and are we doing any sort of medium-term planning around whether these are becoming medium to long-term to permanent issues that are impacting on the finances? Thank you.
Thank you again for a very excellent question, Councillor Ferry. Again, the crystal ball is very difficult to unpick the degree to which the labour force issues are endemic now, or medium or short term. The degree to which the capital program can address them is through early contractor involvement, less reliance on labour, using contractors earlier before permanent, and encouraging policy changes to mean that the immigration border becomes more permeable. It is fair to say that we have had this same impact for 2 or 3 years now. It does seem to me that it is likely to remain the case until that unemployment rate starts to move as well.
Thank you.
Do we measure inventory levels, because that's a good indicator of whether or not the shortage of materials will disappear quite quickly? From my experience and observation, is inventory levels are dropping, and so that I think that this will shorten up and that problem will disappear. But Angela Dalton and Councillor Dalton, next please.
Thank you. There's been some excellent questions, Peter, and I wonder if we can hold them as we move forward, because some of them are repetitive around the OPEX and outgoing years for the CRL, the debt that we don't know about yet. But I wonder if it helps to just agenda them somewhere, so they are there, and even the questions that Councillor Ferry has just asked as well. Excuse me, and Councillor Darby around the movement of the debt should Three Waters go through. It would certainly be helpful for me if I knew that they were somewhere in an agenda as we proceed through our discussions for not just this annual plan but the long-term plan. My question is this. So the Reserve Bank Governor has recommended that we hold on spending. You've said that the levers are still really relevant for us as we move forward with the decision making. Do you think that we should be pulling the reduction in debt level a little bit harder? Do you think your advice might change around that as we proceed through spending, absolutely not spending, as we move through the budget? And additionally, should we be having more of a focus on those non-service asset sales to reduce our debt? But what then is the timing of that? Is the timing enough to see us through, because those asset sales get stalled for various reasons along the way?
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. A number of great questions. The items that you mentioned are generally well encapsulated within the annual report as key assumptions, key areas that Audit Office flags as well. So we do have to keep a very close eye on them and make sure that we manage them through as we become available, as the information on them becomes available. But a very good point. In terms of a debt reduction and the balance sheet, I would agree that the extent to which you can improve the situation by avoiding interest costs, where you have items within the balance sheet that you can remove from the debt position, that will certainly help, and it will help more now in a high interest environment than it will later. Effectively, it means that you're not having to borrow when you are investing. You won't have to borrow currently at high interest rates. You can delay that for a period. So there is some real advantage in that. The mix of levers is, of course, up to council and elected members. But my advice would be it's become a more important lever, that one now, and a more impactful one. In terms of the timing of process for other ones, yes, the implementation ability and the execution of these asset recycling targets, the ones that you can do quickly will have the greatest benefit.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
No question.
Councillor Baker.
Probably I'll let you off the hook, Peter. Probably a question for the Mayor in terms of when do we intend to, or are we intending to bring local boards into the conversation in regards to the annual plan, or are we going back to the old days where we will decide and just tell them this is what it is? And because I know they'll be getting their own information, but when are we going to see them around the table here so they have a better understanding of what the situation is?
Does that require an answer, or? You okay with that? Councillor Baker? Yeah.
Are we bringing the local board chairs into a workshop? And I haven't seen or heard anything about that. We had Team Auckland. It seems to be a 7-a-side team now as opposed to a 15. So, are we going to bring them into the discussion, or are we're leaving them on the outside?
Through your worship. I can't give you the detail, Councillor Baker, but there have been discussions about how and when to bring local boards in. There is definitely an intention to do so, and I think that'll be clarified shortly.
And just to add to that, they have been briefed once and they're being briefed again on Monday. Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Just a quick comment with regards to the OCR this morning and so on. I've never heard a more frank interview with the Reserve Bank Governor, and my knowledge goes back to Spencer Russell back in the mid-80s. On Radio New Zealand this morning, and I would counsel everyone up here to listen to it. He was very, very blunt. He said recession is necessary. Tighten your belts and prepare for a recession. He said the 75 basis points that took us to 4.25 is only just a move in the right direction, and he had to make it that big because he couldn't move again till February. But it was quite clear, he says, after raising it to 4.5, be ready for more increases next year. We're looking to lift the OCR to at least 5.5, so that's quite a significant on the 4.25. You need to be prepared to expect mortgage rates of 8% next year. I've never heard a Reserve Bank Governor be that bold in an interview before. They're really normally very circumspect, say we've got to look at the issues, we've got to think about what happens, and in February we'll be. So if everybody here is interested in it, go to Radio New Zealand, have a listen to the podcast of it. It was pretty blood-curdling.
Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have a question on Andy's point as well, but I guess that is covered. I think the local boards need to be in the tent and understand the dire nature of things. Things are not business as usual. I think this may even be harder than our emergency budget during the middle of lockdown. My question, the Reserve Bank Governor watched that all yesterday. He did mention that there is a continual competition for people, for staff, salary and wage hikes obviously driving part of the inflation story, but the issue is for us, we have a threefold situation happening where we are holding recruitment, holding costs, but we already lose many staff to, say, Kāinga Ora, Wokukutahi government, and then the private sector because they can pay higher than us. What is that kind of pressure? How are we dealing with that pressure of that wage competition out there when we can't compete or unlikely can compete that the private sector are right now? Is that an issue that we're thinking about?
Yes, thanks, councillor. That's an issue we're always considering, and we always have to balance our demand for resources, targeting the right skill sets, paying, or having an employee value proposition that includes salary that's attractive enough to attract the right people. And of course, we are competing in a market, at the moment with low unemployment and high competition for the right resources. So that's the reality of the situation we are in, and we plan our budgets accordingly, right? So the plan that we have in place, against which we have to find ways of closing the gap, does incorporate our ability to continue to staff and continue to pay the people that do the jobs that are essential for the delivery of services for Aucklanders, and that's a balance we just have to continue to make.
And is there thinking, I mentioned the other day in the workshop, around the fact that we are in some cases giving quite hefty discounts on consenting because we cannot obtain the skilled staff to complete those in time? Are we looking at ways to have recruitment open where there's also a revenue gain at the same time? Because at the moment it seems like staff is actually losing, a lack of staff in one area is losing us potentially millions of dollars because of consent discounts.
Yeah, I mean, consenting is a specific use case within our overall employee, makeup. And you're right, we largely recover the cost of our consenting effort. And so we deal with that slightly differently. Our service performance is improving there, so as it improves, the requirement on us to refund customers in accordance with our ability to either meet the service level or not reduces, so that's positive. So that's dealt with as a specific case, and we try and manage the balance between resources and demand, noting, of course, that we think demand is starting to flatten and will reduce.
Thank you.
Will reduce very quickly, I should say. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At a general level, what's the size of Auckland Council's group spend in relation to the Auckland economy as a whole? So if we slowed down our capital investments or our operational spending, do we need to be concerned about the impact of Auckland's GDP on that?
I don't have the ability to answer that, I'm afraid.
It's kind of a balanced question, that, because we also have a demand on the Auckland economy through rates, so kind of like the good question, but it's balanced. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Peter. Look, we got quite a lot of bad media press a year ago over our hedging. The Herald particularly was a bit cruel on us with regards to positioning ourselves. Would you like to just update us in public about where we are now as a result of actually what we did regarding hedging? Thank you.
I would love to. Let me just find something I prepared earlier. Due to a prompt from a FAQ in the Herald, actually. So in broad terms, we can say that as interest rates have risen, we've recorded, and they are non-cash, they're only accounting gains, so they don't actually help us out of any situation, but they do reflect the fact that we're not having to pay these amounts. We had a gain of 1.1 billion in the last financial year because of our interest rate hedges. So that was a protection element that came in there. And even since, even at the end of the most recent financial year, the cumulative result over the entire time that we've had hedging in place has been 154 million. We obviously don't hedge for gains, we hedge for certainty, and so that we have the long term covered off and we have certainty around it. But it's fair to say that a $1.1 billion gain over that period, because we were hedged, has proved pretty useful.
Thank you. It's a big number, and I just hope everyone heard it clearly in the back. Thank you.
There's probably a comment on the financial skill sets of those that write about that. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Peter. Look, I agree with the use of monetary policy coupled with fiscal policy to choke off inflationary pressure, but with CPI now north of 7%, and obviously the impact of energy prices and the war in Ukraine, this is going to take, it feels to me like using monetary policy with the OCR way high will take quite some years, and therefore any long-term hedging with fixed rates over the long term, the benefit of that will probably be ground down because the OCR will be so high for so long. So I guess for me, I'm wondering how hard can we go immediately with respect to the OPEX savings that need to be achieved in order to really reduce the pressure on our debt position. We can talk about the other levers here, but those other levers don't work unless we effectively gear our way out of our expensive operating activities permanently, and it seems to be quite quickly. My concern is that as we go into this budget setting round, we tiptoe up to that lever rather than actually pulling it really hard, because we're concerned about our commitments across the activities, areas that might not necessarily be that relevant to our financial position, but may, for example, be more in line with what we would like to achieve in areas such as climate. So I want to know how quickly do we have to pull, and how hard do we have to pull, and how hard can we get away with in pulling on that OPEX line OPEX lever in order to try and reduce some of the pressure on that budget.
Thank you, Councillor. That's not a question that's easy to answer quickly or simplistically, because there are many different elements to that question. The way in which I'll attempt to answer it is to discuss the cost base in general terms. So in general terms, almost the entire cost base increases through inflationary pressures. However, the ability to reduce costs is much more limited. There are few addressable costs that you can actually have a meaningful impact on. So interest, depreciation, water care, Ports of Auckland, regulated services, targeted rates areas are all ones, even if you did pull the OPEX lever or someone else pulled the OPEX lever, they don't have a benefit for the ratepayer, other than perhaps in a user charges sense. In addition, the OPEX savings that you might make in one area, they'll need to be ongoing if they're going to be impactful, or they reoccur the next year. And they also don't tend to accumulate over time. So the OPEX lever is a necessary one. However, it's not going to be a silver bullet. The size of the addressable spend that could be pulled back is not large enough to be a silver bullet in this space. However, as has been mentioned a number of times through a number of public and workshops, the mix of levers and having options open is the way that needs to be addressed. It needs to be taken on to address the budget and operating surplus issue. That was the case at 270, it remains the case at 295.
Even more so, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Peter. So I guess really the story is of the hedging. The figure we were getting derided for has been largely balanced by matters that have overseen in the previous coverage in the Herald. We're now in a position where we're sort of probably balanced out actually in terms of what may have been lost by not hedging, but certainly depending on how long this current climate lasts, we're on the right side of the ledger now. Just in terms of the publicity around this, and following on from Councillor Simpson, people are going to, next year there's a large number of mortgages that have to be renegotiated, and there's concern over that the Mayor's brought up. In terms of our hedging, I think we've got about 80 or 85% of our loans are hedged. Do we have any negotiations that come up that are comparable to what people are going to face potentially with their own mortgages in the near future?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Watson. Another great question. We're currently thinking that most mortgage holders will feel the effects of high interest rates over the next 12 months, about 58%. About 11% floating, 47% fixed for 1 year or less. When we look at our own debt, we're 80% hedged at the moment, but you are correct. As we move forward, we are less hedged into the future, and we have refinancing and new debt that we need to take on to support greater investment and growth. So we do face a greater impact from inflation over that period, which is also going back to Councillor Dalton's question around the impact of capital release now that reduces our need to borrow for the next few years, because to the extent that we can do that, we avoid those short interest costs at the moment as we come out of hedging.
Thank you for that. I think just before we go forward to the CCO part, I'll make one little statement about what's really clear today is the monthly reporting of financial positions is an important task and an important thing that I want people to get used to. The more you see these things, the more we'll get a feel for them. Anyone who has a little trouble following all those things, you're welcome to have a chat with us. I want everyone to feel comfortable so you get a feel for this. They're not just bland pages of Chinese numbers. They are telling a story. Within those stories, the next thing, under the group one, if we could have the group separating out bus, or even our own ones, Auckland Transport, if we could separate out under other direct expenditure, which is largely going to be the contracts. Buses, ferries and trains would be interesting to see, so that we can get a little bit of granularity without getting too far into it. And you'll get comfortable as you start reading these things. Things jump out at you. I look at this and I see, God, Tautaki Auckland has 14% of the staff that the whole council does. That strikes me as quite something that I'd think, holy something. So it's just this regular reporting, I think, is an excellent thing, not quarterly. And just I want you to get comfortable with everybody. Look at it. If you've got any questions about that you want to have in terms of understanding, I'll either ask Peter and his team or have a chat to me. Before we go to you, CCO, I think noticed everyone's traipsing out to the loo, so we're going to have a 10-minute plumbing break, with the exception of Councillor. You've got two you want to ask right now, and then we'll have a plumbing break.
Very quick, I promise you.
Okay.
It's actually just more again a point of information based on what Councillor Henderson's question was. From latest Infometrics, Auckland's GDP is about 122 billion, and New Zealand's GDP is about 326. We're currently sitting at about 37% of the whole country is based here in Auckland for GDP. And it's an amazing increase. If you go back 20 years to 2001, we were under 34% of it. We're now 37.8%. So Auckland's GDP percentage of the whole country is continuously increasing.
Councillor Lee, quick one, and then we go into the loo.
It's just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor. The remarks from Mr. Gudsall in regard to the limitations of how much this body can economise concerned me a little bit. This is an organisation over $250 million in debt, and with a turnover of $5 billion. I really do think, given those comments, that we really do need an independent view on our situation. I think we desperately need it. Thank you.
I'm just going to give us 10 minutes break, please. traipsing along the hall, I wasn't alone in making use of that break. We will now go back to the CCOs, and again, the information that you've been provided in these is very helpful, and I want everyone to get the hang of it. We're getting a lot from this. And of course, I imagine CCO boards will be considering the very same metrics which are concerning us so much this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora koutou, councillors. I've been asked to cover off a few highlights in relation to CCOs. Happy to do that. My masterful plan to exhaust all questions with Peter sitting in the chair next to me seems to have failed. Look, I'm conscious that we're not yet in our normal rhythm in terms of CCO reporting into the new committee structure and so on. So I just want to cover off a couple of housekeeping points as well, and then go to highlights with the CCOs. So just so you know what to expect in this space, obviously there will be monthly group level reporting into this forum, which will cover key performance stuff for the CCOs. And we will, working with the Mayor, we will look to bring CCOs through here if and as necessary. But the key sort of mechanism in terms of accountability will be the CCO committee and the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. And to that end, we will be working with Councillors Watson and Walker in their chairing capacities to make sure that the program around accountability for CCOs is managed, and you will have the opportunity, obviously, to see more detailed stuff and interaction with the CCO chief executives and board chairs through those mechanisms. So I should also mention that there is also visibility for and of the CCOs through the Audit and Risk Committee for those who are nominated members of that committee, and they will regularly come through there talking to risk and other issues in their space. And then finally, just to acknowledge that the Expenditure Control and Procurement Committee, under the oversight of another councillor to my right, is part of this as well, because CCO expenditure will have some visibility to that committee. That's a little bit of the housekeeping. If I just reminder really that there are a number of levers in terms of accountability for CCOs, most particularly the important letter of expectation and statement of intent process, which is to be worked through and kicking off very shortly, and we'll be working with the Mayor in that regard. Such an important aspect of this in terms of giving clear expectations and direction to the CCOs. I would also like just to take the opportunity to acknowledge to those councillors who have liaison councillor responsibilities with the boards that we will be working with you and supporting you in terms of that role, including looking to bring you together next week to discuss what that support looks like, and to talk through the nature of that role and how it interacts with the boards. So just down to a little bit more in terms of highlights. If I go through the CCOs very quickly, Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, really 2 points there. They are continuing to see recovery, if you like, in terms of the numbers of people attending events, participating in or attending venues under their direction. In the quarter, we're back up to over 500,000 ticketed attendances at Tātaki Auckland Unlimited venues. The reason I mention that is that it goes to post-COVID recovery, having obviously had a very difficult period of time prior to that. More generally, for quarter one, Tātaki is on track to achieve its performance measures, that which is in their current statement of intent. Okay, so they're going okay. Eke Panuku, likewise, they have a range of metrics. Just speaking to councillors who might not be as familiar with this, ranging from property sales, revenue optimisation stuff, and measures in terms of the outcomes from their developments, number of residential units, commercial footprint that they're enabling through the Transform and Unlock projects and so on. There are 12 of those, 9 are on track, and it's not that 3 aren't, it's just that they're not measured on a quarterly basis, they're measured on a longer term basis. Water care, the story with water care likewise is pretty positive in terms of their statement of intent measures. They are on track with their capital program. It is under pressure because of some of the factors referenced earlier in terms of labour supply, supply chain pressures and what have you, but they are on track with their capital program. They're they're not meeting one of their performance metrics, which is in relation to sewerage overflows, so a water quality related metric, and they submit that that's largely down to adverse weather conditions causing problems, and obviously they've got a significant program of work to remedy that through the Central Interceptor and other interventions. Auckland Transport, very hard to cover Auckland Transport given its breadth and scope quickly in an update for you now. Their capital delivery is lower than budget. It is consistent with where we were this time last year, but they are experiencing pressures in terms of their capital works program for the reasons mentioned earlier. Staffing, supply chain issues and such like. So their quarterly report reflects that pressure. They are, I think councillors are aware of this, the sort of ongoing slow recovery in terms of public transport patronage. I know that's been traversed in briefings with you. They're currently at about 67% of where they were pre-COVID. So it's a slow and painful recovery with obviously ongoing revenue consequences in that space. Mr Mayor, I'll leave it there, I think. Happy to answer any questions, noting that the deeper dive around CCO performances with those other committees in due course, when they will be there to answer questions as they appropriately should in terms of their own accountability to you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I'd nearly forgotten. My question is actually sort of a more general question, really, which, you know, a lot of what we've found with the discussion with Peter, and I suspect with the discussion we're about to have, is more in the economic space. And I wonder if it would be useful to have the chief economist as part of these discussions as well, because, you know, no offence to the expertise of the two people in front of us, that might help in terms of some of these larger macro issues.
Okay, I'll note that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll just check to see whether the chief economist predicted it as well as I did.
All right. Thanks.
Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Phil, I'm wondering, given the limited numbers on the expenditure and control committee and the CCO committee, And going back to the conversation that we just had with Peter, whether there is a snapshot from the audit and risk that needs to come to the full committee at some meeting in whatever form. So we've got the matrix, and also what I was referencing to Peter was around the projected OPEX for CRL, the things, that list of stuff that was asked during the questions, the sale of the watercare assets, or the transfer of the debt if Three Waters goes through. I think the things that, because I'm hearing these questions come up quite regularly, and I think if they are in audit and risk, and sure, councillors can go to the meetings or they can read the minutes. My experience is that doesn't happen. But I think to avoid relitigation and to ensure everyone is informed and the information is in front of them could be helpful. And I don't mean redoing a whole new document. There might just be something that can come out of that audit and risk. It's quarterly, isn't it?
Thank you, Councillor. The audit and risk is a quarterly rhythm, that's right. We do bring routinely reports back up from audit and risk, so there's visibility around the governing body table. The chair does an annual report that's possibly not as useful given its infrequent nature. I'd note that the Audit and Risk Committee, of course, also provides commentary and input at critical moments in terms of the annual plan and annual report process, so that's another mechanism to give it visibility at this level.
I don't know what it is. I don't know. I wonder if it just has to have more of be more prominent, because those reports come through. I mean, I attend audit and risk, but the questions keep coming. So I don't know if it's just how it's presented, that it's not, that maybe it needs to be bullet pointed, I don't know. But yeah, thanks.
I'm happy to discuss that with the Mayor in terms of visibility at this committee.
Yeah, thank you for that question. My experience with audit and risks is that nobody pays them all that much attention until you get a whoop whoop pull up moment, which we are in at the moment. So I would be most surprised if the audit and risk minutes aren't read much more widely this year than they possibly were last. Okay, that was a very full discussion, and thank you for all those who participated. I'd like to have a move and a seconder to note the information provided in the performance reports. Simpson and Leone. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. It was a very good debate, very good, helpful debate. Right. We now move to the appointments to Te Puna Monga o Tamaki Makaurau. Since our last meeting, welcome Dominic, I'll put a few words in here before you get away. I've heard and taken into account feedback from many of you on the appointments to the Te Puna Monga Authority. There's a very strong view that we should appoint elected councillors, not external people, and I've listened to and accepted that view. I'm putting forward three councillors, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Leone and Councillor Turner. These three councillors are those that expressed an interest in the role directly to me over the first and subsequent weeks. They're all capable councillors with a mix of experience and fresh faces, and my expectation is that they will work together well. Like the other roles we agreed last week, I consider these decisions in light of the overall allocation of responsibilities. And I hope this meeting will show confidence in your three colleagues who are all capable and well-intentioned. They have a challenging job ahead and deserve our support. I also hope we can also acknowledge the hard work of the elected members who have done this role for the past 3 years, which has included some challenges. They are to be thanked for that service. Before I open any discussion, the purpose of this item is only to appoint the members of the authority, not to debate its role or previous decisions. You received a legal briefing on some matters this week about that, and we'll arrange for a further in-person briefing where we can have that discussion. So try and refrain from going off topic. This is just about the appointments. So I'll introduce Dominic to the Lions Den.
Well, kia ora tātou. I can't see any points I need to raise in particular about the report. You've had this carried over from the 17th. So back through to you, Chair.
With that said, I'd like to move the motion and have I a seconder. And the Deputy Mayor, thank you. Questions, Councillor Darby?
Can you just clarify, you're moving the motion, and you're moving the motion, you have the first bullet point, or the first number there, Councillor Christine Fletcher, bracket Deputy Chairperson. Are you suggesting our decision today confirms Councillor Fletcher as the Deputy Chairperson?
Under the legislation, we appoint the Indigenous members appoint the chairperson, and the council appoints the deputy chairperson. And so I have that there, but
Can somebody tell me, what does the law say? Is it the council or is it the council appointees? That is the 6 council appointees. I just don't have the legislation with me.
Through the Chair, my understanding is that the law says that it's the 6 council appointees that appoint the deputy chair and the 6 mana whenua appointees who appoint the chair.
So
good point. I'm quite happy to amend that.
So we just need to remove the bracketed section, I think.
I'm happy to do that. On that basis, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Sorry, Your Worship.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've indicated...
I see your hand. I'm sorry.
No, I indicated that to Sandra and she was going to put it there.
Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koe te rangatira, Your Worship. Your Worship, I've got a compromise because over the last 6 years, have been a member of the Tupuna Maunga Authority. I still wish to be one. That was highlighted in the first meeting we had. So I've got a compromise, Your Worship, and that is that there be a vote between myself and Councillor Turner to be the 3rd member on the Tupuna Maunga Authority. The reason I'm putting this compromise, Your Worship, is because, one, I'm not going to end up, for me anyway, saying, look, Councillor Turner's not this, not that, not this. I'm not into playing the individual game. I do, however, just want to put in front of the committee and then we can put it to the vote, if that's okay, in regards to the way forward, and I will call a division, is to end up saying 6 years I've been on there, Your Worship. I have, as per the 3.3 of Meredith's report, I understand and know the roles and responsibilities of member of the Tupuna Maunga Authority. So, Your Worship, and I just want to acknowledge Meredith for this, I think it's a way forward, Your Worship, is just to have a vote on whether myself or Councillor Turner, if it ends up with Councillor Turner, I wish him all the best on the Tupuna Maunga Authority for the next 3 years. So, Your Worship, that's the compromise I have, because I still wish to be a member on the Tupuna Maunga Authority. Kia ora.
Are you proposing an amendment that we have a division between yourself and Councillor Turner for the 3rd position? Have you got a seconder for that?
Your Worship, based on your earlier comments and the fact that Councillor Turner has made it known that he's also willing to go on, I just believe that the governing body, which we're in now, can make that decision with a vote between myself and Councillor Turner. And then that way at least we can both move on. And I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so you're moving an amendment. Is there a seconder to that?
The amendment is that a vote be conducted between myself, who is still willing to be on the Tupuna Maunga Authority, and Councillor Turner, and then we just put that to the vote, and it's called by division.
There is a seconder to that amendment. Okay, Councillor Fully. We'll vote on the amendment. All those in favour, perhaps we'll go for some hands, I suppose, this time.
We see the amendment, please.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Turner's got his hands up as well.
Okay, I've just been having some advice on this. It's going to be a division, and hands acceptable? Hands acceptable?
No, I have to call him out if he does a division.
Okay, at this stage here, Sandra with an R is going to take over and run the division.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Filipino has been able to explain himself a little. Can I?
I'm sorry. Just say that again, Councillor Turner.
Well, Councillor Filipino has had a chance to just explain his experience and history. Can I?
I think that's fair. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say that I have practical experience in this area. My great-grandfather settled on the West Coast, had 9 sons. My family set up Huia Private Reserve Limited in 1939. That land owns the most prominent and most well-preserved Maori pa in the Waitakeris. I have a large family. That company, it's a European structure, but only because in 1939 when it was set up, my forebears didn't have any other sort of idea of how to do it. It's really a trust. In the constitution of that company, it reads this: it is not the objective of the company to produce a financial return to its shareholders. The return to them is in the contribution the land makes in quality of the environment and its freedom for the descendants of the family to have and enjoy the land for access and recreation. I'd also say that I was up there last weekend. I go up there regularly. I've got a big piece of property that bounds straight onto it. And that marae site on the top, I think it's a fighting pa really, that marae, that pa site on the top, it's deteriorating badly because of the vegetation growth, and it would be better off being cleared. I also have 2 granddaughters who have Maori ethnicity, and because of whānau stuff that happens to all of us over a century, and movements within the family and the constitution in order to do a lot of the things that happens in the manga that I've read in the media, the way there's inter ideas and even inter fighting. One of my 2 granddaughters with Maori ethnicity will have to be the major shareholder of that company, owning 16% of the company. They are mana whenua in Whangarei, but they are mātāwaka in West Auckland, yet they will be the largest landowners, the largest person owning this property. I have a very down-to-earth, modern understanding of the complexities of my little molehill, and I'm sure I can bring common sense and an honest, fair representation of everybody to this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the past, I've always refrained from getting involved in discussions around the Maunga Authority. I recall I was even asked to chair a protest meeting 2 or 3 years ago relating to Owairakara, I believe, and I said thank you, but no thank you. I made some comments last week, essentially requesting information the legislation governing, among other things, the Maunga Authority and the Settlement Act. Last Sunday, I received an email from the chairman of the Maunga Authority, which evidently quoted everything I said at that meeting. He must have had a stenographer on the job, but he highlighted a section which appeared to concern him, and that related to the cost of the recent litigation, and also, and I think this was his main concern, not so much the $1 million, it's actually more than $1 million. And more than $1 million plus GST, that litigation cost the ratepayers of Auckland. But he was concerned that I mentioned the chairman of the authority and not the rest of the authority. In other words, don't just blame me. What about my mates? They were involved in it as well. Anyway, to be fair to him, I should have mentioned the whole authority, not just him. However, I am concerned, and which is the reason why I asked for the briefing material, is that people who go on to that authority as council representatives under the scheme of the Act to ensure common benefit of ngā mana whenua o Tamaki Makaurau and other people of Auckland. And I think the other people of Auckland have not been treated well by the Maunga Authority. They've had to go to court, the local community.
Point of order, Your Worship.
At their own cost.
Point of order, please. 1.4.6, relevance in regards to the resolution which is, and it will be put up, in regards to just replacing Councillor Turner or myself, and relevance now that we're hearing Councillor Lee talk about, it's a point of order, Councillor Lee. And so, Your Worship, I'll just let you rule on that. Kia ora.
You are correct, and I accept that. But I heard your piece. But
Mr. Mayor, I'm explaining why I think it's important that this amendment be voted down. And the fact of the matter is, previous members of the Maunga Authority appointed by this council were involved in that $1 million litigation against the people, the local people, and therefore I have no confidence. I have no confidence in that member who is interjecting.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Who can uphold the common benefit.
Councillor Lee knows that when there's a point of order, that there's no discussion.
It's going to be hard for the stenographer with all these points of order, Councillor Filipina.
Thank you so much, Your Worship.
You're going to have an opportunity to vote from this in a minute once we've heard from Councillor Hills, but thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Mayor. My concern here is that the comments that I've just heard make me less supportive of voting through the original, but just hear me out for a second. I will be supporting the original motion, but only because I have always supported what the Mayor puts forward in all the appointments, and that is what I did last week. But my disappointment is the process. Those names should have been there last week, and I think the process hasn't been good. We can talk about that later, but if it was part of the omnibus of all of the names, this would have been a much smoother process. But I'm disappointed Alpha's not there. I think he is a fantastic representative and has been on the Te Puna Maunga. We should not be appointing people for what I've just heard either. We shouldn't be appointing based on what we think people around that table are going to do, but I won't be supporting the amendment. For the fact is, I supported all your other appointments and you worked with all of us to do that, but it should have been there on that day and I'm disappointed it wasn't. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, just wanted to briefly add my voice to my colleague Councillor Hills here. I disagree completely with what he said. We should have done this last week, frankly.
Perhaps I should apologise for not managing to make it so well. One slight correction, at the very first meeting I had with Councillor Filipana, we didn't get as far as discussing this, but at the next one we did. On that basis,
Your Worship, I just want to speak to the amendment which I have a right to.
Please do.
Yeah, so look, and this is going to be very brief. As I said right from the start, this was no reflection on Councillor Turner, and if Councillor Turner then took it as a slight, well then I won't apologise, but I said right from the start, Councillor Turner, that there's nothing to do with you or your history, because my history goes way back and way before yours. So all I'm saying, Councillor Turner, is this was never ever a slight on you, Councillor Turner, never ever. And I just wanted to make that point. So thank you, Worship, and I just look forward to the vote.
no, thank you. We've eventually arrived at this place. I'm going to let my administrative assistant run this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, you're voting on the amendment moved by Councillor Filipina, seconded by Councillor Foley, and that is to replace Councillor Turner with Councillor Filipina. Councillor Barker. Baker, sorry. Councillor Bartley.
4.
Councillor Dalton.
4.
Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Ferry.
What is for result?
Abstain.
Yes. Councillor Filipina.
4.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Foley.
4.
Councillor Henderson.
Abstain.
Councillor Hills.
Against.
Councillor Lee.
No.
Councillor Leone.
Abstain.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Sayers.
Against.
Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Stewart. Councillor Turner. Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson. Councillor Williamson. And the Mayor. That's lost 12 votes to 6 with 3 abstentions.
Thank you for that. We'll move the original motion. Well, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary? Carried. Thank you for the way that you negotiated that in an excellent manner and without rancour. I appreciate that,
Thank you, Your Worship.
councillors.
Kia ora.
Item 9 is an amendment to the elected members' code of conduct. Mr McNaughton is present here to advise us on this. I note that this is basically about timing.
That's correct, Your Worship.
But in reading the thing, and I have been told that there is consideration for a more detailed review of the code of conduct at some stage in the forthcoming year. But whilst we're doing this at the moment, there is one simple thing there that I can't see why we haven't done that too. The point of this is to realign ours with the local latest legislation, is that correct? Well, within the latest legislation, there is a move that the minimum amount goes from $100 to $500, and I can't see why that isn't included as well, because $100 doesn't even cover a lunch for a person and a wife, and the administrative burden on reporting such a puny sum far outweighs the value from it. And I would like to see whether or not I can get a seconder for an amendment that includes that we raise the reporting from $100 to $500, particularly in an inflationary environment. So I have Councillor Williamson and Councillor Henderson will move to amend the 100 to 500. It is a very small, this is just a small, simple thing we're doing, if I'm correct, and you have addressed me on this occasion. And if we're going to get things into line, I can't see any reason why we don't do that, because I don't imagine there's a single person in the room who's going to be bribed by $100. $100 was probably worth $500 when they put this in place, but $100 is only worth 99, and since I made my speech. So can I put the amendment that we move the $100 to $500? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. The contrary? Oh, Councillor, you've seconded. Thank you. In favour? It's carried. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to, I know that you're here to explain it, but if it's monumentally simple, we're just adjusting the time at which we do this on an annual basis and has no impact whatsoever. So I'm going to put the amendment. It needs a 75% majority, so please stick your hands up. All those in favour, put your hand up. Eh? Right. Sorry, I've been held here in absence. The mover and the second for the original one have now been recorded.
So I'm counting.
Okay. Now, put your hands up again, those in favour of this horrendous change of... Okay. Unanimous, thank you very much, yes. I thought for a dreadful moment you were going to vote against this. Achieved that monumental change to the fundamental principles of our society. Thank you, sir, for coming. I'd like to move to the next item, which is the governing body schedule for the next 3 years. So you now know where you are. We'll all be booking our Christmas holidays in a certain time of the year and our midterm break at exactly the same time of the year. And I think you've obviously laboured hard to accommodate this within the calendar. Would you like to address us, Mr. Kempen and Mr. Sandra with an R?
Yeah. Your Worship,
worked hard to produce
to put
this.
on the table, I'll move.
I'll second.
And you've got a mover and seconder for this, Your Worship.
Thank you for putting it on the table. We've got a mover and a seconder. That's excellent. Have we got those ones? Yes. And now I still want Sandra with an R to explain this. She has worked long and hard here for this.
Through the chair, kia ora koutou. This is a 3-year meeting schedule which has generally been put into a pattern that gives visibility to both members, staff and the public, so that there is an opportunity for everybody to forward plan their calendars. The frequency of the meetings has already been agreed to in the terms of reference that you did last week. Generally, the smaller committees will be held on Tuesdays, workshops on Wednesdays, and governing body and the committee of the whole on Thursdays. We have included the CCO Direction and Oversight Committee in that, as we feel with CCOs coming to report that more time may be needed. There are some meeting breaks that have been planned around public holidays as much as possible, but this has not always been feasible. There is a longer break over the Christmas period. I've taken into consideration the CCO board meetings. There are some instances where subcommittee meetings of those may clash. We've tried hard to avoid those clashes, but the sheer number of these meetings means that that has not always been possible. There are some further joint and co-governance meetings which need to be added to the schedule, and they will be done as soon as we get membership. The ability for us to make minor changes has been included in the recommendation, which will include consultation with the relevant chair and the mayor or deputy mayor should we need meetings on a Monday or a Friday. Steve and I are happy to take partai.
Are there any questions? Councillor Darby?
Just one thing I know, there's a presumption here that workshops would be online, like mainly online. And I'm concerned about that, Mr. Mayor. I mean, workshops, it's not about just looking at the screen and participating. It's actually having, a number of conversations during the workshop, before the workshop, side conversations. It's like, that's where you really build your information base. And I would be really concerned if we, use the COVID world as an excuse as to why we can be less informed. So, Steve, maybe I'm really wrong on that, but why is there a presumption? I think it's in paragraph
Very good question, Steve.
13.
Yes, I can answer that through you, Mr. Mayor. We did have a lot of good feedback last term with workshops being online. We are obviously in a slightly different world now with post-COVID. I guess the assumption is that we can utilise all our technology by having workshops online, and that might be the default, but there is no reason why, if there are certain topics or things that need to be discussed in person, that those workshops could be arranged in person. And we're really happy to work with the GA and the chair of that committee, depending on what the workshop is for. If it's more appropriate that it happen in person, then that can definitely be arranged. We're not precluding that from happening whatsoever.
So then can I assume that the workshops are actually formal in-the-room workshops, but there is the opportunity to join online rather than it is an online workshop?
There will always be the opportunity for people to attend electronically, either our workshops or committees, and that will always be the case.
I think it's a very good question. We were just fitting the calendar rather than that detail. But I imagine there'll be some form of compromise that where the people, the chair and deputy of whichever committee is asking for a workshop will make a decision as to which way they want to hold it. There are times when the workshops are more suited to online, and there are other times when exactly what you said, we need a good old discussion about it where we might front up. But there will be the opportunity for those that are perhaps only partially interested to show online. So let's not assume that they're all going to be one or the other, and I think we'll allow for pragmatic solutions to be guided by the chairs and deputies of committees calling those. Is that a fair solution for everybody? Excellent question. Thank you, Councillor Darby. Councillor Turner?
No, you've covered it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Filipaina?
Your Worship, no partai, just a whakaaro, if that's okay, as in comment. Your Worship, the reason that both myself and Councillor Dalton moved and seconded this is because we want to acknowledge the mahi that Sandra, you, your team, Steve, not only have done in the term of this Auckland Council, but also in the next 3 years of this council. So just to you, to your governance staff, to Phil, just want to, both of us, and I'm sure this committee just wants to say thank you so much for the work that we know you will be putting in. So Sandra, ngā mihi ki a koe, ngā mihi ki a koe is Steve, and ngā mihi ki a koe te katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Okay. I'm going to put this vote now. All those in favour of adopting the 3-year diary, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no, it's carried. Thank you very much. I agree with Councillor Filipaina. This is not easy to do, and there was a lot of effort and jiggering around that involved quite a lot of us. Thanks very much for that. The next item is the summary of governing body and other committee information, memoranda and briefings. Moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Fletcher. Can we just go ahead and adopt this, please? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, carried. There are no extraordinary items, and I declare the meeting closed, and I'd like to thank you all for your excellent contributions in what has been a sobering day following the announcement of the central bank's move. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Philippine.
Your Worship, I wanted to grab this opportunity, and I don't want to be online. I wanted to grab the opportunity, Your Worship, if you want to get an update of the